Hello and welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Our guest this week is Marcia Stepanek, a journalist, author, media strategist, and media professor. She is also the co-publishing a newsletter on Substack called New Rules, which we'll dig into. Our conversation today will focus on how digital crowds are rewriting the rules of politics and how emotion is the new battleground. My name is Neil Parekh. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our Digimentors website. We're also live on Instagram, which is always a treat. We always get some new folks coming, and I just got to hit a button right there. There we go. I hate looking off camera, but sometimes you got to do it. Please retweet, comment, share, tag your friends. Let them know about the great conversation we're going to have. In addition to talking with Marcia about her work, we're also going to, of course, dig into the New York Times. And this week, we have a special treat. It's the New York Times for Kids, the special once a month, the last Sunday of the month, print only special section. And one of the things that's really special about our relationship with the New York Times, particularly Tom Jolly, the print editor, and Wayne Camadoy, the art director, is that we get to share the PDF of the New York Times for Kids with our audience on our website until noon today on Sunday. It's an exclusive arrangement, and you can only get it. You can only get the PDF here. So go to our website when you get a chance and find Marcia's show. I'll put the link in if you need it, at least on Facebook. Go and download that link. Go and find the link for the New York Times Magazine. Sorry, New York Times for Kids, and share it with your friends, with family. So generally for kids who are between 9 and 11, 10 and kind of 13, thereabouts. They'll get a lot out of it, I am sure. Adults get a lot out of it as well, frankly, even though they say that kids shouldn't read it. Grown-ups should not read it. And I'm just putting in a link for the show. So again, we please let your friends know, tag your friends, etc. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Muck Rack. Muck Rack has been a longtime sponsor of the show and has been supporting us in so many ways for so many years. So we want to thank Muck Rack for all their support. And we also want to remind folks that the show is produced by Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sree set up with his good friend Andrew Lee, and that I'm proud to be vice president of events and communications for. We do digital marketing, events, and digital programs like this, strategic communications, trainings, and workshops. We also help with staffing and recruiting. More importantly, recently we've taken on a lot of work around AI. So we wanted to let you know about that. We also want to let you know about a very interesting book launch that's coming up in just a few days, next Saturday. Asima, which is a great nonprofit based in India, will be doing a online discussion that we're producing for them. Asima's journey of transforming lives, empowering lives through education, 25 years of transformative impact. Sree is going to be moderating 2 panels that day. So we look forward to doing that, and we hope you might join them for the show. And we'll share that with you as well. And here's the link. Sometimes it's challenging to type and talk at the same time, but I do my best. But thank you, everyone, for joining us. Let's welcome some of the folks who are watching. We've got a lot of people joining us so far. Patricia Freudenberg offering greetings from New York. Patricia, always great to see you. Hi, Mom. Mom saying hi from Hastings-on-Hudson, New York. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. And let's see who else. Naomi Service is offering salutations from a soggy Upper West Side. And I don't know if the remnants of Helene are up in New York just yet. I don't think we've seen it, but incredible flooding, incredible devastation in Florida, North Carolina, power outages in Georgia. Our hearts go out to everyone affected. We hope you and yours have been able to stay safe. And just right on cue, Deborah Kerr is saying hello from Fort Lauderdale, offering prayers for Western North Carolina, especially friends, neighbors in Asheville, and our artist and farmer friends. Deborah, I'm glad that you're doing okay. You were in Florida. Please, we share your concern with everyone. I have close friends who live in Asheville as well. I reached out, or used to live in Asheville. Just devastating if you see the images of the flooding. Diana said, I read the New York Times kids section despite the warning that is just for adults. Diana, there's so many good articles in there. My question for you and for others as we get there, what do you know about Riz, Skibbity, Preppy, and Stigma? That's the test. That's the first test we're going to give you in terms of the New York Times for kids. We'll get to those in a few minutes, of course. Ken Fisher watching from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Pradnya watching from Silver Spring. Pradnya, I know your kids would love to see the New York Times for kids if you don't get the hard copy. So please make sure to go to the website and download that. And Diana, no worries. We're all tripping on our words just a little bit. But yes, it's meant for kids, not grown-ups. But we get a lot out of it anyway. Fernando is watching from Mexico City, offering salud. Fernando, pleasure to meet you. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the guest host today. Sree is traveling back from North Carolina, actually. I believe he was in Charlotte for the Jaipur Literary Festival, and hopefully they didn't get hit by the weather. I wasn't able to check in with him yesterday. But Fernando, if it's your first time watching, thank you for joining us. Our good friend John Lee is watching from a murky Upper West Side. John's watching on YouTube. So thank you, John. Thank you for your support of the show. And Paula Kiger is watching from Tallahassee, praying for all affected by Helene, of course. Stephen Kaplan watching from Ramsey, New Jersey, as always, offering good morning to our New York Times read-along family. Eric is watching from Ottawa. Thank you, Eric. Always great to have you. Pradnya is all over the lingo. Apparently, she's a Sigma mom. My question, Pradnya, if I asked your kids that, would they agree? I'm just saying, or would you be cringe? I'm just keeping it real. All right. So with that, we want to take a quick look at the paper, and then we'll bring on our guest, Marcia Stepanek. So let's go ahead and we'll do a quick hello. Raju Lama, president of the SARC Journalist Forum from Nepal, is watching. Raju, thank you so much. It might be the first time I remember seeing you comment on the show. Again, I want to point everyone to the banner across the top. This is Sree's Sunday New York Times read along. But I'm sitting in as the guest host today, sitting in the big chair. Steve Herman wants to give his regards to Marcia. Absolutely. She might remember me from her Tokyo posting. And I see Marcia backstage and she's nodding and smiling and happy. Now she's laughing. We will find out more about their Tokyo posting and see what she can share about Steve Herman, who is a former two-time guest on the show. And Pradnya said they'd be horrified that I use that word. You know what? That is exactly the reaction your kids should have. And that's what the article in the New York Times for kids says, is that there's a reason that kids are horrified when we try and use the lingo that they have created for themselves. We'll get to that in a little bit. But let's go ahead and take a look at the paper and see what is in store for us in just a little bit. So I'll just go over to the side here, and we'll explore a little bit of the paper before bringing on Marcia. So the first, the front page is it's a little dark and maybe hard to tell, but the caption, Beirut's southern suburbs on Saturday as Israel resumed its airstrikes on Lebanon, a day after the leader of Hezbollah was killed. As you can see, all the smoke rising in the skyline. And the lead, of course, is a two-column. Hezbollah chief confirmed dead in Israeli strike. His killing sets new course in Lebanon and steps up pressure on Iran. That's Hassan Nasrallah, who was killed in an airstrike. Other articles on the front page: scandal grounds a high-flying life. Taste for luxury could be mayor's undoing. Of course, that's an article about Mayor Eric Adams of New York. Cartel's best fentanyl mules are Americans, luring the vulnerable whose U.S. passports ease crossings. And then right here around the fold, with son's future in spotlight, Vance's mother faces her past. It's about Senator J.D. Vance and his mother. And this is where it's hard with the fold, but the article about the fentanyl mules, this is a picture of Customs and Border Protection team inspecting cars at the San Ysidro port of entry in California. The other articles on the front page: a Caltech boot camp without Caltech teachers. That's interesting. And floods leave Western North Carolina in ruins. That's obviously, we've been talking about that. And that's the dateline is Asheville. Some really horrible, just devastating video that I've seen around that. We'll set that aside for the moment. Here is that New York Times for Kids. Again, it's available on our website. You can go download it, the website for the show. If you go to digimentors.group/New York Times Read Along. Whoa. Sorry about that. I realized that we lost the camera feed. I didn't know that happened. Let's see if we can add that back. My apologies. There we go. Hopefully that wasn't down for too long, and we'll return to the show. Looks like everything else is working fine. Thank you, Ken. Yes, that is better. So I appreciate that. Hopefully it wasn't too long. I don't see too many other comments. So let's continue. And again, I was mentioning that the New York Times for Kids is available on our website. So if you go to New York Times, I'm seeing some glitching. There we go. All right. So we have to adjust. I guess there, for some reason, that's not working on my other camera. Give me a moment, and I will go with the backup plan. Because you always have to have a backup plan, right? So as we adjust, as we log into, and sometimes in the past, I've actually had my phone logged in for just such occasions, but I figured I didn't need to. And let's see if I can do this and if the audio will work. So give me one moment. And let's see here. And we'll aim this toward the paper. And there we go. So we will do it this way. And hopefully that will work in terms of showing the paper. Everything good. People can see the paper at least. You can see the mess on my desk. This is the reality of live TV. And Naomi likes my video game share. Thank you, Naomi. All right, so let's focus on the paper and the task at hand. This is the New York Times for Kids. I love this section every month. We'll take a closer look later. But this is the front page, and it says, effectively it has a bunch of slang on the front page. What's cool now is the theme. So we'll definitely take a close look at this in a little bit. There's also the New York Times, the restaurant list 2024, 50 places in the United States that we're most excited about this year. Sree and I were actually in Decatur, Georgia for our client SPLC recently, and we ate at an Indian restaurant called Chai Pani. And what was interesting about that, they have two locations, one in Asheville, one in Decatur. The one in Asheville was listed as the best restaurant of the year. Not just Indian restaurant, best restaurant in all categories. Arts and leisure, put them all together and see what you hear. Podcasts can make compelling conversation sound effortless. And that's certainly something that we are very interested in. So we'll take a look at, but the the article by Reggie Ugwu. I was looking to see what was below the fold. Some classical music, a film, and a television piece. So let's take a look at that later. Sunday opinion. Modern conservatism can start over. It's happened before. Donald Trump may be the right standard bearer today, but history reassures us that MAGA is not an apocalypse. That would be nice if we had that reassurance. It certainly felt like an apocalypse when Trump served as president the first time, and I still can't believe that people would consider re-electing him. That's why we need to get out, and it's still close in a lot of states, folks. Don't take anything for granted. Sunday business. Tragedy turned Nadia Milleron, the niece of Ralph Nader, into an activist. Now she's a candidate. A grieving family, a famous uncle, a mother's crusade. That's the business section. Sunday styles. We have to flip over to see what this is about. The man with all the access. There may be no photographer whom celebrities trust or like more than they do Kevin Mazur. And then feeling nostalgic behind the curtain. The analog photo booth is finding new subjects among a younger generation. Absolutely. Those photo booths are great. Book review. The cover is The Lost Tribe. Joshua Leifer's Tablet Shattered is both a history of Judaism in America and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, cri de coeur from a heartbroken member of the family. That'll be interesting to look at. The New York Times Magazine, I thought the design was really interesting in terms of the cover. I haven't seen a kind of a bold yellow, bold color on the top, but Food Voyages, 6 trips in search of one magical bite. So that should be interesting. And then the Tea Magazine, which we never have time for, from Brussels to Provence, houses that dare you to look away, all eyes on us. So that is the quick run through of the paper. We'll put that back in place, and we will switch to bringing on our guest. Our guest, of course, is Marcia Stepanek, and we are thrilled to have her with us. She is on Twitter. You can follow her at Cause Global, and she is a journalist, author, media strategist, and media professor. We want to welcome Marcia to our stage. Marcia, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Good morning. A couple of adventures in live production, huh? Having the camera come in and out. And
it's always the way. And I know when I teach social media and technology at Columbia, some of the experience I've had in the past, maybe a couple of times, has been when something failed or some computer system crashed just at that time. So right. My heart is out to you, Neil.
Thank you. Well, part of it, I mean, and you know, it happens to everyone, and even, you know, I mean, how many shows that we've produced for ourselves, for clients, and you know, sometimes you have to be prepared and have backups, etc. And at some points, you have to roll with it. You know, for example, like I never want to show my empty chair on the screen. That's not what I'm, you know, trying to do. But people are forgiving, which is always great. And you know, I got a little nice video game chair from Naomi, so that was cool. Patricia, thank you for saying you got this. I appreciate it. Amy McIntyre is watching from the Pacific Northwest. Amy, thank you so much for joining us. I don't recognize your name, but I did live in Seattle for 15 years. So glad. I'm wondering where exactly in the Pac Northwest you are. Seattle, Portland, etc. And Pradnya says she loves Chai Pani, this restaurant that Sree and I went to. I'm curious, Pradnya, were you in Georgia? Were you in North Carolina for it? So with that, Marcia, we're going to jump in right away. You know, we did a little bit of an introduction. We have a little bit of a background, but I want to cut right to the chase.
Okay.
Talk to me about Tokyo. What happened in Tokyo?
Tokyo, I was bureau chief for Hearst Media. And it was a wonderfully complex place with so many layers. I struggled learning some Japanese, choto dake.
Oh, really?
And it was just an incredible experience because prior to going to Tokyo, uh, I was an auto writer for the Detroit Free Press, and Japan had very much at that time, and still is, competing very much with the big three at the time for the US auto industry. And it was very interesting to cover Detroit as kind of the microcosm of everything challenging the American industry at that time and American business. And going to Japan was very interesting in covering how that economy was starting to boom. And so the contrasts and similarities were quite fascinating. Stephen Herman, I know that you were probably there at the same time and have some similar observations. But
Absolutely.
yeah, but it was also, I was the bureau chief in Tokyo, but also had many trips to China, Beijing, Southeast Asia, Korea, Indonesia, etc. And it was a great time, and it certainly helps to inform my journalism and my teaching now.
And I'm sorry if I missed it. What years were you there?
I was there actually in the 90s, and again for a short time in the early 2000s.
And did you notice any major difference from the two stints that you did in terms of uh, the politics or society, culture, anything like that?
Yeah, politically, in Japan, things were starting to feature into some generational differences, uh, very much similar to some of the generational differences we see today in the United States, a booming Gen Z population at that time. Now, and more recently, the population of Japan for younger people is declining, and of course, they are one of the first global populations to have a boomer boom, if you will, and it's really challenging their economy. It's challenging the labor market. It's challenging their politics now, and it is foreshadowing some of the things that we need to be looking at here in this country as well.
Interesting. Interesting. Thank you for jumping into that. When I saw Steve's comment, it couldn't have been great. Steve, we actually went to Steve's house several years ago here in
Okay.
Northern Virginia, and then he was also a guest in June, just around the release of his book Behind the White House Curtain, of his years as a White House correspondent. So Steve's
Yeah.
a good friend of the show, and we always like to see those connections. I want to point out Amy is here because of a connection with Stephen Kaplan, and he's a connection of his in Port Angeles, Washington. So, Amy, thank you so much. So glad you could join us. So Marcia, let's talk about your work a little bit. We teed it up in terms of describing that our focus will be on how digital crowds, kind of, I guess, the online audiences are rewriting the rules of politics. Certainly, we've seen an incredible shift in terms of how politics are not just covered, but also, with the candidates. Kamala Harris, a great example in terms of her understanding of memes, et cetera. But it's not just how they're rewriting the rules, but how emotion is the new battleground. Can you talk about that a little bit? What do you mean by emotion being a battleground in politics?
Yeah, well, feelings have always played a role in politics, but not as big a role as they are this year. Vibes are now central.
Vibes, right?
Yeah, to both campaigns in this era of fear and anxiety. Emotions are very much bubbling to the surface. And I recall, as a young reporter covering Bill Clinton's White House for Hearst Media, I was always reminded by Clinton's senior advisor at the time, James Carville, of his famous line, "It's the economy, stupid." It was a reminder that despite all of the attack ads and poor debate performances and other issues of the day, that it would be the state of the economy that would always make or break a candidate for higher office. And recent polls show that the economy is still very important this election year, of course. But even Carville says in a recent conversation with him that, no pun intended, emotion is trumping the economy this year. And after that first debate between Harris and Trump, there were like 63% of those who watched it told CNN in a poll that they felt Harris turned in a more emotionally solid debate performance than Trump. They didn't even refer to the issues. The Atlantic had said Harris stayed human while Trump went feral. And then there was Taylor Swift, who, of course, endorsed Harris on Instagram after the debate in a post that received something like 7.8 million views and likes, and saying in part, she said, I quote, "I believe we can accomplish so much more in this country if we are led by calm and not chaos."
It was she and her cat are the ones.
And she was
right?
she signed it Cat Lady. Yes.
Yeah.
Holding her cat. So there's lots of anger and fear and great confusion, making this election very unique. Lots of people are fearing who they might become on the far side of all of this change. Men have said they're unsettled by the future of gender equality in some places. Many white people are unsettled by a future of racial equality. This is all part of the poll data that we've been diving into.
Sure.
And then there's the anxiety of a lot of young people, as you know, about the climate. What's going to happen? Is this government structure equipped to handle some of these concerns? And also, we've interviewed a lot of people who are now in politics who came out of some of the high school shootings. They're very young Gen Z politicians or would-be politicians and voters. And they're just wondering, is democracy up to the challenge? Are they going to include things like basic safety? And so it's really an interesting time.
I would say, yes, is democracy up to the challenge, but are we up to the challenge? Because we know what we face. We know what we, I think it was either Maya Angelou first, but then certainly Oprah. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And Donald Trump has shown us who he is time and time again. And we know what happened January 6th. We do not want a repeat of that. It's almost, it's scary enough, the idea if he wins. It's almost scarier if he loses, what kind of impact that'll have, what will be unleashed. And so it really is up to us. It's not just our institutions. We need to back that up.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw in the New York Times
Sure.
in this issue that there was an opinion piece by Perry Bacon Jr.
Oh, okay.
And he had said something like, American democracy is in trouble even if Harris wins. And he made 5 points.
Yeah.
Harris could either comfortably win and have both houses. The other option is that Harris wins and congressional Republicans shut down governing. Or Trump wins, but with an asterisk, meaning more to come, kind of really fashioning, solidifying some of the MAGA philosophies. Trump wins the popular vote in Electoral College and Republicans carry both houses of Congress. Or, Bacon says, Trump clearly loses the Electoral College vote, but a state unfairly blocks certification of the results and a Republican judge or a House install him as president. Not very optimistic, I'm afraid. Interesting
nightmare scenarios. But even to me, even if, if you don't have those kinds of machinations, and we saw a lot of that last year with the fake electors, et cetera.
Right.
Even if there is according to the polls and according to the exit polls and, the popular vote, and let's say that there's a, more decisive victory from Kamala Harris. I mean, she would have to run the board, I think, to make any difference. And even if she did, regardless of the outcome, Donald Trump is going to object and, moan and drag his feet and say it was all rigged and all fake, and who knows what is going to happen. It's almost like no outcome is going. It's kind of like choose your own adventure, but none of those final pages is good. You don't get to a good place.
Yeah, well, in this newsletter and forthcoming podcast that myself and my co-founder Bradley Schurman have created, we've started looking into a lot of Gen Z and generational issues, as well as demographic issues and kind of the stories that other folks aren't really delving into. We're blessed with a really good data bank, and we're blessed with some really good network insights of both famous people and not so famous people who are really focused on resilience. That's kind of what we're looking at uniquely. And what's interesting is we see a gender gap, coming forward between especially Gen Z females and Gen Z males. And what Trump's social media is doing is now really focusing on some of the not so well-known social media platforms like Twitch for gamers. And what Harris is doing, she's got 200 people working on her social media aspect of her campaign. A lot of them were with Biden, but were not given permission to really unleash their talent unbidden. And so now what we're seeing is a really highly sophisticated campaign for Kamala Harris that is getting into memes, as we all have seen, with playing on the memes, the cat ladies,
look,
the coconuts.
Right? I was going to say the teacher look too. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yes, exactly. Very well coached. And what's interesting too is, this all plays into even the strategy on how to introduce Tim Walz with his flannel shirts.
Yeah, of course.
Ordinary guy. So it's what's so fascinating about digital media is the visual aspect of it. It's like at a glance for so much. So,
well, you mentioned your New Rules podcast, and you have the Substack newsletter. Tell us a little bit more about this. You launched this back in January, correct?
Yes, and we're kind of, started kind of behind the scenes a little bit, but we've been picking up some really terrific stuff, and we were really honored that Substack chose us as a featured publication for this, which is really wonderful. And we publish on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays. But what makes us really passionate about this, Bradley is a futurist demographer. He's really terrifically engaged and knowledgeable of so many things. And my background is a data storyteller as well as journalist and media entrepreneur, kind of putting flesh on the bones of the data that we have. And so together we're really passionate about looking at not just the issues of the day, but really trying to find some clarity that we can share and decode some of the complexities of today's issues, the major ones, migration. For example, we ran a story about people and how they're migrating because of climate change. Where they're going from one place to another place, oftentimes not much better. And some of the early issues that are arising out of this, not just from the real estate industry or the insurance industry, but also from places that are promising to really start to get people back together talking about what is the challenge, rather than climate change denialism that is still rampant and climate change panic, which is rampant on the other side. And somewhere in the middle is where we need to be with the political leadership that so far is starting, but it's not very local. So it's been really interesting to have some interviews on a very local scale on that.
Absolutely.
We're also, exploring the challenges of today and focusing on the change makers kind of at the forefront of building some of these new models for change. There's futurist Andrew Zoli, who's helping the planet build a network of satellites that are focused on designing new ways to engage with climate change and provide the data needed to help people see things differently from above. We've been following Maxwell Frost, had an interview with him recently. He had been working,
Congressman from Florida.
yeah, from Florida. He had been working with survivors initially of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, those,
Oh, wow.
I guess that site of the mass shooting. It's 17 people were
Yep.
killed and
Yeah.
17 others were injured. And it's still
Parkland.
the deadliest mass shooting. And he's now the Gen Z congressman and one of the influencers in their network. And
Is he the youngest congressman, or,
yes,
yeah?
yeah. And then there's also historian. We look in history. Heather Cox Richardson is been fascinating because she's putting into terrific daily context this popular movement that we're seeing now to reestablish and improve American democracy. And not just historians, but we're also looking at futurists and interfacing with them and on our podcast and in the newsletter. One of them who's really been interesting is this AI pioneer, Mustafa Suleyman, who's doing a lot of work with personal ways that AI can help us rather than create or exacerbate some of the doubts and problems going forward. So he's really kind of very deep into that. And that's just for starters. We're also, future focused. We have looked at, for example, how Gen Z so far is mirroring the resilience and determination of the greatest generation before them. So uncovering some of the hidden connections of our digital age and revealing some of the surprising ways we're actually more united in some ways than divided.
So let's take a closer look at some of these topics. We have a few examples to dig into. This is Gen Z, the new generation, the new greatest generation. Parallels exist between the youngest generation of adults and the oldest. I'll admit I haven't seen those parallels drawn out like this in the past. Usually the commentary about millennials and Gen Z are around, what they're like in the workforce, what their attitudes are, et cetera. But you and your colleague Bradley, I guess, wrote this article, sees some greatness here.
Yeah, despite what we've been led to believe, generations are more alike than most think. And as you mentioned just now, Neil, especially the conversation has been in the workforce. But as some of these norms and technology realities change over time, behaviors of generations also change. And so we took like a big picture look at some of this data. And, both Bradley and I in our work have taken us down the rabbit hole of research to uncover the secrets of what makes Gen Z tick. There are lots of generational experts who are saying this or saying that, but they often miss what we feel is some of the foundational realities facing Gen Z, which are more akin to those we found of the greatest generation, which was from 1901 to 1927. The great grandparents of Gen Zers than any other generation living today, those parallels. So both generations grew up in fairly dark economic times in which there was gross inequality economically, instability politically. Gen Z in its earliest years were amid the Great Recession and later the economic instability, of course, of the pandemic. And then following those dark economic periods came some incredible economic growth in labor markets. Organized labor started for the greatest generation, of course, coming out and being formed. Right now, we're seeing a slight resurgence of the labor movement kind of beginning.
A little bit.
Especially through the pandemic. There was a lot of organizing by Gen Z and in the nonprofit sector.
Yeah.
That power is still now working to connect with traditional labor organizations. So again, we'll see what happens, but some of those trends are really interesting.
So,
and then both also experienced the rise of new media. So there was TV and radio for the great generation. And for this generation, of course, TikTok, Twitch, Instagram, all of that stuff.
The second wave of social media, if you will.
Second wave. Absolutely.
I would ask though, And I think the graphic actually, really shows that that contrast. For me, so first of all, looking at the greatest generation, the older generation, and looking at the economic times that they lived in and they grew up in, and the new media that they had to deal with, etc., is definitely a more nuanced view of a generational experience. Uh, as someone who just kind of has a passing understanding, or maybe a little more than a passing understanding of the different generations, of course, the greatest generation, the boomer generation that came after, my parents' generation, uh, Gen X for me, millennials, Gen Z. My daughter is Gen Alpha. That's a whole different thing, right? We'll talk about actually New York Times for Kids is definitely a Gen Alpha focused publication. But for the greatest generation, the defining moment or defining experience, as I understood it, was World War II and being able to, go overseas and, eventually, first of all, defend Europe and then defeat Hitler. Um,
Absolutely.
right?
And this look is by no means taking anything away from that honor and incredible profile of the greatest generation and how they essentially saved the world.
Right. But I guess, and I want to say, you're not taking away from that by any means. I'm
No.
curious about what, I mean, for Gen Z to be elevated to that level, what's their World War II? What's their kind of equivalent?
Well, they've already begun to shake up political norms, and they're rewriting the way campaigns need to be run, uh, as we've seen in the Harris-Trump contest so far, but also with Obama a little bit. A lot of those folks were hired and on staff as late teenagers, and now in their 24 years old, 21 years old, changing politics in a way too that is changing engagement. And of course, their active work on TikTok is, it used to be TikTok used to be, oh, let's watch kids dance and their cats falling off of couches, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's very much a news organization, and a lot of Gen Zers as well as other people are really talking about the news and influencing some of the opinions. Some are covering it like a journalist would, with like, here are the facts. Some are covering it from how those facts are being received, and some are breaking stories that aren't being covered at all. What's
Mm,
really interesting is the big question for Gen Z. How will they contribute and follow in the footsteps and confront the challenges, the big challenges of the day? And it looks like climate change is going to be one of them. It's
sure.
already started to be.
Sure.
But will they rally toward a unified cause like their grandparents? And with the realities of networks and some of the influencers and the creator economies right now, it looks like that's possible.
And I'll posit, they do have a potential opportunity if they are a bulwark against uh, Trump and the MAGA crowd, and a rerun of January 6th, etc. That could be their moment if they are able to help. I mean, again, it's going to be on all of us. We can't leave it to just Gen Z. But that might be the big um, confrontation that we're facing over the next several months into the next year, into the beginning of what is hopefully a Harris-Walz administration. We make no bones about our politics on this show, Marcia, so I hope that's okay.
Yeah,
But
no,
it's, without question, that's where we're hoping this country will go. I want to bring in a few comments before we go look at the another two articles from you. Diane Stefani is watching on Twitter, saying good morning from Margate, New Jersey. Such an important topic to understand. Thank you, New York Times Read Along, for this show, and thank you, Marcia, for bringing this to us.
thank you.
My mom was making just a comment about Taylor Swift, that there were some reports that she lost maybe if not business, definitely followers on social media, etc. After she came out with her endorsement, Republicans are upset, and that's perfectly fine.
She also gained a lot too.
She probably gained a lot as well, absolutely. And if I'm not mistaken, and Pradya, I'm going to lean on you as another parent of Generation Alpha kids. I think it was Chapel Roan, if it was or Sabrina Carpenter, I can't remember which one, who said that they were not going to endorse. They were going to support Kamala Harris personally.
Yeah.
Chapel Roan, but they weren't going to formally endorse because they were concerned about that kind of backlash, and I think that itself generated some backlash. So it's definitely a challenging, and I will say that for celebrities and sports figures, it is a very polarizing experience. I mean, I feel it from the other side when I see a beloved Mariano Rivera, for example, as a huge Yankees fan. When he comes out supporting Donald Trump, I get a little punch in the gut. You don't want to see your heroes. You want to see them on what you think is the right side. You don't want to see them on what you think is the wrong side. So I think it is a challenging space for celebrities to be in.
Oh, very much so. And for all of us to be in. I mean, I don't know how your Thanksgiving dinner was last November.
Thanksgiving dinner was fine. My mom came down. Mom, I want you to know that you're welcome to come down to DC before you go to Florida. She goes to Florida in the winter, but last year she came down to our place for Thanksgiving. It's just the five of us, or I guess four of us with our daughter.
No,
so
that's
a problem.
But many of my students relayed how it's really hard. And teaching communications, it was, Professor Stepanek, do you have any like magic ways to talk about division over dinner?
Sure. Oh no, we had that for years going, with not so much in my family when we had the bigger gatherings. Luckily, my extended family on my dad's side, almost entirely Democrat. Other relatives, certainly on Facebook, that's when you see it in terms of social media. But historically, years ago, we'd go to Pam's family, for my wife's family, for holidays, and definitely a mixed crowd. The one thing that we could agree, at least, well, not everyone could agree on. So luckily, her brother-in-law is a Yankees fan, so we get along great. But we have some other relatives that are Red Sox fans, and it doesn't always work out. I mean, it's sometimes. And I'm serious, Marcia. I'm not talking about politics. Like Yankees, Red Sox, that's real stuff. That's real,
Oh, listen.
Spicy.
When I saw Shohei doing his famous for the Los Angeles Dodgers, and being born and raised in Chicago, being a diehard White Sox fan, the contrast couldn't be more great.
So sorry, Marcia. 121 and counting. Oh,
we're for the underdogs. Very
the Cubs for a long time, but let's hope they can get it down to 100 losses next year.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So a couple other comments. Let's say, so Patricia has an interesting comment. What are your thoughts on AI? Do you use AI for these images?
Some of these images we use Canva, and some of AI. And Bradley's done some really good work with that. We kind of brainstorm over kind of the ideas, and we've really come up with some really arresting images for this that we think are, sometimes they're funny. Like we had for Disinformation Story, we had the Pope wearing his famous bubble jacket, and all of the disinformation that had been said about the Pope at the time was kind of the intro to our story on disinformation, and just how easily images can be used to morph. There's also, more seriously, one of the people in our network is Sam Gregory, who's head of witness.org. And of course, he's become quite a national spokesperson on disinformation and deep fakes, and just how that technology is going forward to really try to disinform people in new ways, like voice fakes,
Sure.
um, video fakes, and so on and so forth. But what we also see are some of the really interesting ways that some nonprofit organizations, some businesses are starting to use AI, particularly to come up with memos and things,
Sure.
but creating really strong and interesting guidelines that will soon be, I believe, standardized into what those ethical challenges are, with where the guardrails should be, and internal fact checking. Now, as you know,
Well,
Neil, the journalism industry, we've been fact checking for a long time. This is new in fact checking, or at least to have formal fact checkers in the digital media space has been new, and it's now finally beginning to be very serious and very sophisticated. So good to
sure.
see that.
I will say there's a right way and a wrong way to use AI in your day-to-day work. Sree talks about that a lot in his workshops. And I'd be remiss if I didn't share this graphic that we use to promote his workshops, if only to show the change from 1988 when he was teaching about how to use the web to just recently his first workshop in 2023. You can see a stark difference in his hairline. I think he doesn't have a hairline anymore, and he knows that I tease him about it all the time. I have hair; he doesn't. So when anyone,
Sree and yourself, Neil, I know have done these social media weekends,
yes,
also
yes,
too, which have been incredibly influential. And Shree's amazing work at Columbia, where I
yeah,
now teach, is still remembered as being amazing.
thank
And
you,
he still has so many fans from there, and deservedly so. He helped us all to be inspired, and
absolutely.
we owe a great debt to him. He's really been great.
Um, but I did want to, if folks are interested, you can learn more about Sree's workshops at digimentors.group/SreeAI, digimentors.group/SreeAI. And speaking of AI, and you were talking about the graphics, I actually liked your Instagram account that you set up for New Rules Media, and I want to just scroll through that just a little bit. Um, I love the images. This gives you a better sense for our viewers, just the range of graphics. I like the consistency in terms of the title and the bottom label on
Mhm.
all the pieces. But this is just really well done. Kudos.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
And
we're having a lot of fun with this, and it's visuals have always been an adjective or another form of communication for whatever story or whatever media you're conveying. And so, sometimes when we have burning cakes, for example,
over here, yeah.
yeah, or when we have the Pope, or that one piece we did with the prompts and circumstances, we called it, and it was
Mm,
about
mm.
disinformation and AI, and the ups and downs of that as well.
I was
Uh,
looking for the Pope image. I didn't see it.
it's not in there. We're
Oh,
still
okay.
loading stuff up.
Sure, sure.
But Balenciaga, the bubble
Yeah, of
wrap.
course. No, of course. No, it was a great meme.
We had good
Let's
fun with that too. We actually got an email from the Vatican saying that they would have otherwise been upset, but they're not, and that
wow.
was kind of interesting. And we only have that because one of our we both work sometimes in Milan and have an Italy connection, and I also teach at the University of Bologna in Italy as a guest lecturer. So it
Well,
came in handy for that story. Let me
let's do a little more of a deeper dive on this. Emotion is the new battleground.
tell you.
The authoritarian right has been playing to feeling, and now so is Kamala Harris. And this is uh, the the article that you wrote on this. Let's spend some time with this piece.
Yeah. So the vibes that come from this are so many different kinds. There's the race and gender vibes that come out of some of the social media. We've talked a little bit about the fashion choices, for example, the brat stuff, the coconut vibes, the memes. There's also the gender vibes where this gender gap is quite big between mostly white, young Gen Z and millennials, and female Gen Z and millennial women. And the gaps are like 35-40% between how they feel the importance of gender, or whether they have ever felt uncomfortable because of their gender in inside polling. There's the joy vibe that's being used. Of course, the Harris Walls thing is we're getting joy back into politics. Well, it's not just happy talk, but in communities of color, as you know, the use of the word joy is a cultural reference to the organizing strength of political movements built on the value, again, of resilience and inclusion, and efforts to resist racial bias, gender bias, segregation, supporting religious freedom for all. And so these relevancy vibes, Harris and Trump are duking it out on social media. And it's mostly to get the 41 million Gen Z voters now registered to vote, some for the first time, to make a difference for their side. And because so many people have already voted, and those undecided voters seem to be, from some polling, mostly Gen Z at this point, or at least one of the big cohorts that are considered undecided. That's where a lot of energy is going by both campaigns, and thus that digital strategy that's been so effective for both sides.
I want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Tachi watching on YouTube, saying hello from Fort Lauderdale. Dr. Tachi, thank you so much. Dr. Tachi has her own show, Media Scope, if I'm not mistaken, which is really great. I hope everything has been okay. I know Deborah is in Fort Lauderdale as well. Deborah Kerr. I don't remember if Helene hit the Fort Lauderdale area, but hopefully you and yours were safe. Marcia, I want to ask you before we move on to the newspaper, because we want to make sure we give time for that. You are working on a book that's going to be coming out next year. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, it's we call it the New Digital Divides, and it's basically looking at companies and organizations who have one big foot in the industrial age and maybe a couple of toes in the information age. Still, there's quite a lag between companies and how much, have they been wired yet? I know this sounds like people have been wired for a long time, but it's now a stark competitive difference. And it's not just about training. Some of it is about investment, but it's not just about money, and it's not just about training. It's very much a cultural divide, which is concurrent with some of the other cultural divides that we're seeing between generations, although this one isn't just generational, it's more leadership. And what's so fascinating is that so many people talk about that hierarchy where, top-down leadership. And of course, what digital does, or the demands for digital, and some of the demands of including employees in the workplace and having them be considered as important as customers or fundraisers or funders, is dependent very much on a flattening of that hierarchy and a new form of leadership. And that new form of leadership, very interestingly, is going to have to be a foundation for how AI is then further integrated into the workplace. Certainly making humans first, but also considering AI as a colleague in some places rather than others. And so this is still very controversial and still very new. But the book looks at some of these differences, looks at some of the innovative ways, successful ways, and the ones that aren't so successful, on how to manage change and how to manage knowledge services within the context of this transition. So
That's great. That's a lot, and we're looking forward to seeing it when it comes out.
Thanks.
So I'm just changing the settings on my phone, so switch to the New York Times.
Great.
So you can still hear me
Yes.
on the show now? Great. So let's go ahead and focus on the paper, and we will go from there. There's the paper over there. I will put that on screen, and let's turn our attention to the print newspaper. And we'll just bring you back on the corner.
I'm glad to see it's still kind of a fat newspaper, at least on Sunday.
It is, and that's one of the things that during the pandemic, the question was, I think Donald Trump called it a failing New York Times. When you have this much of a Sunday paper to give you the thickness, I think it's definitely holding its own, which is good.
Well, and digitally is where it's at, and that's really holding its own right now for them. They
do great work digitally. We actually, when we have special features, we'll show both the print and the online, so that folks have that sense. We always enjoy doing that. So let me just fix the setup here real quick. There we go. And I'll just give a quick comment from my mom before we hit the paper. Marcia, so glad that you are multi-talented and doing a lot of work in different areas, including teaching. My mom's alma mater. Absolutely.
Fabulous. Oh,
we're big friends of.
That means a lot. Thank you.
Big friends of Columbia. I actually learned to walk on the steps of Butler Library, apparently. At least that's what the
that's
rumor has it.
That's great.
So let's dig in here. We looked at the front page earlier. And inside, this is one of my favorite sections, the story behind the story. This is inside the Times. Outwit, outplay, outlast, the politics of Survivor. Interesting to see where this is going. Kellen Browning is a reporter covering the 2024 election with a focus on the swing states of Nevada and Arizona. He is based in San Francisco. So it's just saying, when I first heard that John Lovett, the prominent political podcast host and former speechwriter for Obama, not that John Lovett from Saturday Night Live fame, would be a contestant on the new season of Survivor, I pleaded to my editor to write about it. To answer your question, yes, that show is still on. So that's an interesting piece there. The Dateline section, one of the things they added, we actually had Megan DeTrolio on our show about a year and a half ago. She redesigned this whole 2-page spread. And one of the things they added was this Dateline, where Times journalists are reporting around the world. So they're reporting this week from Guadalajara, Tequesta, Florida, Kharkiv, of course, with the war in Ukraine, and in Thailand as well. So what else do we have? Their international section, a fruit picker's death illuminates Italy's ambivalence on migrants, needing the workers but subjecting them to cruel exploitation.
Yeah. One thing, new rules. We were in Italy. I was on a shoot in Rome, and I took a weekend to fly to Sicily, to this little town that had ancient ruins. And in those ancient ruins were the goddess of fertility. And the irony there is that this population boom of older people and bust of younger people was creating real political tension as well over, well, we need workers so badly. And the prime minister, the new woman leading, is like in this debate between, well, we're not going to like have immigrants come and take this labor, but then what is the What is the solution? So it's a real interesting debate. And in that tension and fear and all of those things, that story seems to play as an example of just kind of how things are going over there.
I think that's an issue worldwide, right? As populations decline, and various societies try and figure out how to maintain their economy, maintain support for older generations,
Mhm.
and you see that playing out in the States. I know there was an article earlier this week as well. I can't remember which community they one community welcomed immigrants, and some of the people who live there actually fought, not fought back, but kind of objected to it. This specific article, and I actually hadn't looked at the detail yet, but the caption: Indians in Italy and agricultural workers unions protesting in Latina in June after the death of Satnam Singh, a migrant who was taken home, not directly to a hospital, after a serious accident at work. So my bias comes into play. I hadn't looked at the picture closely. This, if I had, justice for Satnam Singh would have gotten my attention. But I didn't think of Indian immigrants in Italy. I was thinking of North African immigrants, and others. So that's actually, it shows how complicated this
Very
dynamic is.
Yeah, and young people are migrating outside of Italy now to find work, and those who are still in Italy who are not working or going to school to learn new skills are part of the debate over how to encourage those people to start working if people are against migrating. Just a really interesting thicket of
Sure.
things. Um,
Here's more about the killing of Hassan Nasrallah in Lebanon, and more pictures inside.
mhm.
Strike deepens tensions between U.S. and Israel. Um, Here's an interesting. We also like to pay attention to the ads. Again, we were talking about the health of the New York Times. Front page ads are definitely an indication of people find it valuable still to get a front page ad. This is from before birth through age 2, or what pediatricians call the first 1,000 days. A child's brain, body, and immune system undergo a period of rapid development. Dairy foods help support that remarkable growth by providing essential nutrients like protein, calcium, potassium, and iodine. See dairy differently. And this is talking about the growth curve, using a pregnant mom's belly. It's interesting with my background working at United Way, not just the first 1,000 days, but birth to 3, and the importance of reading before 3rd grade. But to use that in advertising, I think is the first time I've seen that.
Well, yes, and according to folks at Ad Age and some of the big marketing organizations, there's now a kibosh on cause marketing
Interesting.
because of, at least for now, because a lot of companies are complaining that they're just losing too much business.
Interesting. Here's more on Hassan Nasrallah, who led his. So this is the obituary. Neil McFarquhar and Ben Hubbard. Hassan Nasrallah, who led Hezbollah for decades, is dead at 64. I would assume, and we've had several obituaries writers on our show, most famously Amy Padnani, who wrote the Overlooked series. But the Times is famous for having pre-written obituaries ready to go, and I would wonder, if they didn't have one for various Middle East leaders over the last year or two, they probably hurried to get them ready, knowing that this was going to be an evolving story and that there were going to be attacks on both sides.
Neil, there's a really good guest commentary in the New York Times today, too, about someone who is writing, who's an author of like diary books, which are really big right now.
Okay.
About how writing your own obituary right now is a good thing because it makes you value life even more and forces you to look back on what your life is and what you still want to achieve, and makes the argument that it's about optimism. And it's a real interesting take if folks want to like look
We'll-
into the corners of the New York Times this morning as well.
We'll definitely take a look at that. We were talking about the dynamic between immigrants and residents, and this is, I think, a great example. An immigrant haven is roiled by rumors and mistrust. Charleroi, Pennsylvania, former glassmaking hub, is still attracting scores of immigrants, but tensions have flared since former President Donald J. Trump falsely claimed they had brought massive crime.
Yeah.
So here are the two quotes. People are sort of disaffected that their lifestyles have changed, that their industry is gone, and so they look for someone to blame. That's according to the Charleroi borough manager. And then here, probably right now, there's someone dying back in my country who will never have this chance that I've got. Joby Charles, seeing a high school senior from Haiti.
Yeah, immigration is actually helping us as a country and providing a lot of good work that other people aren't taking. And as has been argued, but factually correctly, those who are immigrants legally are the last thing they would ever do is do any kind of crime because they know that they would get deported. So it's just one of these political memes, if you will, that are just not concurrent with fact.
Of course, and to underscore how how much that makes sense, how logical that is.
Right.
My daughter Emily made the same exact point. I mean, she's been, all over, and she's been seeing all the takes on they eat the dogs, they eat the cats. I mean, that's become a social media frenzy now. But when we were seriously talking about it, she literally said those same words. Mom, Dad, that doesn't make sense.
Well, it's a form too of race baiting.
Well, sure, of course.
And it's just, that's been older than the hills in our political system, but it's kind of surprising to see now how many uses are being found to be part of the political debate.
Absolutely. I just want to point out that this is the continuation of the article about Mayor Eric Adams in New York. But this article at the bottom, from elegant Oakley to Adams, city has a long and colorful history of scandals. This is written by our good friend Dan Barry, who's an incredible storyteller, incredible writer. So definitely encourage folks to check that out. Of course, while I'm guest hosting the show, unfortunately, I cannot drop links to articles in Facebook. So certainly encourage you to go back to look for articles later if you can. Hopefully this will be a little bit of a guide. So this is the end of the front page section. I always like to point out that the New York Times printing plant at College Point, which I've had the pleasure of touring, Mike Connors runs the operation there. They can print up to 40 pages in a section. But the New York Times around the country is printed at 27 different plants around the country, different cities. When I was in Seattle, it was the Seattle Times that printed it for them and delivered. Here in DC, it's the Washington Post. And the other plants can't go that far. They can only go 22 pages. So it almost creates like another section underneath, right, in the A-book. So it's always interesting to see that.
Yeah.
So, and I do want to spend a little time with my favorite, the New York Times Magazine. And there's some really special stuff in here. I will remind folks that if you go to our website, you can download a PDF of the New York Times for kids until noon today. The full PDF is on our website. So I encourage you to grab that and share it with friends and family. Even though it says an editor's note, this section should not be read by grown-ups. I will assure you there is a lot we can learn, and it's so much more accessible in terms of getting the content. So first off, we'll see this first section. The New York Times has some questions. So the phone rings, an unknown number. The caller asks you for your name. We're speaking briefly today to voters in your area, they say. You spend 15 minutes answering questions about your feelings. The next thing you know, your opinions are being reported in the New York Times. Well, not actually you, at least not until you're old enough to vote. Sorry.
but calling people up. There's a whole looking at the process that reporters use to gather information. Here's a piece: without back to school is harder without a bus. Last year, Boylan Blacker, then a sixth grader at W.E.B. Du Bois Elementary in Louisville, learned not to depend on the bus to get him to school on time or at all. Sometimes the buses were late. Sometimes we had bus drivers who didn't even know where they were going. Some days he walked to the stop and no bus ever came. I didn't feel safe. This is, real experiences for young people. The kid designed voter sticker is a howling success. And this is the design. Sorry about the shadow from the light. But there's a election day sticker, and this was designed by a young person. Why politicians are talking about the price of milk. This would be a good explainer for anybody, Marcia. It's really good content.
Absolutely. Here. There's also on the New York Times digital versions too, and some of their social media, a reference to the cast of Hamilton. Mm-hmm. They put together a rap piece on the importance of voting.
Yeah, no, I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
Here's a piece: kids in Mexico City took over the government. So that's an interesting piece to take a look at. And then lunch is serious for kids with allergies. So the whole, kind of, some of the challenges, how to react, medicine to the rescue over here. And then the centerfold piece. Again, for folks who this is a once a month feature for the New York Times. They show 47 first day looks for kids around the country, mostly ages 13, 14, it looks like. Some 12-year-olds, 11-year-olds. But just to give a sense, they show a big Riz in the corner. Extra points to anyone in the audience who can tell me what Riz means. I know what Riz means. Do you, Marcia?
Yes.
Well, let's see if anyone in the audience can jump in with that. Because one of the next articles coming up is this one, which I thought was great. So this is at the bottom here. For kids, slang is its own secret language. And the graphic focuses on Riz, Cool, Fire, Sigma, and Preppy, which, I mean, it's incredible what folks are saying. We're hearing it almost every day. And as Bradley mentioned earlier, if adults use this language, kids, it kind of drives them crazy.
Yeah, it's not cool anymore.
It's not cool, but we've been doing this for generations. Every generation has their own slang that they've used, and they've been embarrassed when their parents use it. And this article does a really good job of explaining that process, about how that's played out, over years. So I definitely encourage folks to check this out.
So Neil, who's your favorite choice for being Riz?
It's got to be Obama, right? I mean,
okay.
That's an easy one. That's an easy. So Riz is a way of talking about charisma, and I think from the very beginning, Obama has had that in spades. He's just the coolest dude around. I mean, whether you see when he's singing, when he's with Michelle, I mean, and the memes, him dropping the mic. I mean, unless you have a different answer, Marcia, who would you go with?
There's like most words, they have the predominant definition, and then there's another definition.
Sure.
And the other definition now is that it's somebody's ability to attract a new love interest.
Well, specifically, yeah, right.
Yeah,
right. This food section. This is interesting, and I actually shared this with my wife Pam. Potential ideas for lunch. Shake up your lunch. 4 meals you can pack in a jar and take anywhere. PB&J salad, chilled sesame noodles, pesto pasta, sushi in a jar. Just interesting stuff. I love this section, opinion, where they have first person opinions from kids 9 through these are all 9-year-olds from what I can tell. So that's interesting. Shows the range 9 to 13 for this section. And then they have their own sports section as well, with the history of baseball caps, which I can certainly appreciate, with a Yankee cap. I will object, though. There's no such thing as an orange Yankee cap. That's an abomination. That is just wrong. Please don't do that again, New York Times. Thank you. And a section, my biggest sports moment, a illustration by Nap Kawan, but by Alexander D'Angelo, 10, from Plantation, Florida. And the back page ad, I believe that girls should get paid as much as boys do in jobs. I don't know why they are not, because it's not right. Just because we're girls doesn't mean we don't work hard enough. Girls can do everything, boys can do and more. Not getting paid the same amount is just wrong.
And Neil, we've seen this at New Rules too, when we're really diving into some of this data on Alpha and Gen Z. Well, very remarkably and unprecedentedly in terms of the size of the numbers that are coming in, the most important value for a majority of these, at least the people in these generations that were surveyed by Pew, shows that fairness is the most valued value.
Sure.
And fairness. And it's so interesting because it's kind of changing the conversation already around so many things.
Sure.
And
so just as a quick reminder, the full PDF of this New York Times for Kids is available on our website. You can go to digiventures.group/NYTReadalong and find the show with Marcia Stepanek on it. And if you scroll down, you'll find a link to the PDF. It'll only be available until noon Eastern time today. So I certainly encourage you to pick it up.
Can I mention one more article?
Well, yeah, no, we have a little more time. And I was actually going to ask you, Patricia actually put the question on the stage. Do you have a favorite section of the New York Times?
I love it all. I know that's a cop out, but I just love it. And especially, yes, I was born in the last century, but my students and my kids are also say that what they love is the surprise of it, to have a newspaper and to read that old-fashioned thing, right? But
sure,
every time they get done reading it, they discover so many new things that isn't being on digital, obviously geared just to them and their algorithmically reported interests, right? So that kind of thing, I hope print continues to be a part of the media ecosystem, because I think it's really important to have that variety from which to choose.
So where would you like to go? Is there a section or a specific article you want to pull up?
Yeah, well, it's just about and being in the media. And I just love how people are using visual media to express things that really cross all languages and all sorts of generations. And this is a global profile of a street artist using the ruins of in Ukraine.
Which section are you in?
It's in global profile, and I printed it out this morning. And it's
it's online. It's not in the print.
It is in print. It should be, but I got it online.
Okay.
And it's a street artist who documents the war in Ukraine. And he's captured life in wartime Ukraine in dozens of grim images. And they're harshly beautiful. He had one that was talking about a plywood panel covering a smashed door at City Hall, featuring Molotov cocktails. And he wrote on the mural, "Hellish hospitality." He's gotten hugely positive response to his work. In the eastern cities liberated from Russian occupation, the destroyed buildings and bridges have become his new canvas. And he transforms remnants of devastation into symbols of resilience amid some of the horrors. And he's quoted as saying, "It's my huge gallery, the best gallery possible." and he's just sharing some of this stuff, and it's he's getting feedback from people in Ukraine that say it gives them a sense that they have to keep going, that there's optimism here, that there's we're in this together, is still what he says is part of his appeal.
Well, let's take a look. I found the article.
Yeah, there you go.
Online. Let me just switch to that real quick. There we
And
go.
each piece of work bears some captions as well. And yeah, that's a good one.
So here, this is more a conversation. Mr. Zinkivitsky joined the volunteer battalion in May 22, expecting to fight, but his commander, Wright, had another idea about how the street artists could contribute to the war effort.
Yeah. And his street art is more than just art. He's documenting some of the reality around him.
Yeah.
And he's written on the bottom of some of these, warning, life goes on. So they're not giving up, which is really
so he's seen here scouting for places to paint.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is what they showed in terms of this. This is the main image online.
Yeah, and some of the he's gotten some criticism, and some of it is please paint something beautiful like flowers or something that's literally optimistic. And he says he doesn't want to paint smiling children or beautiful flowers because it's war.
Sure.
And after the Ukrainian cities of Izium and Kupiansk were liberated from Russian occupation in 2022, he rushed there eager to see what had become of his pre-war murals, and so many of them were still there with everything else destroyed around it, which was really interesting to him. Sure. So it's just the power of visual media now, especially, of course. They're like at a glance things, and especially with memes and so on and so forth, they often say more than print could ever say, of course. But what's so interesting too is that they can be shared globally to share meaning. People don't need the language to understand.
Absolutely.
Wonderful, powerful stuff.
Well, Marcia, before we wrap up, we're approaching the 10 o'clock Eastern time hour. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining us for another Sunday morning. We'll make a few quick announcements, and then we'll bring you back on to offer some final words and some thoughts around emotion in politics, around new rules, around what you're seeing, what you're observing. So we'll give you just a little bit of a break off camera. Again, our guest this week was Marcia Stepanek, and we appreciated everyone joining us. We had a great conversation. As soon as we're done, just a few minutes after we're done, you'll be able to watch the whole show from its entirety on Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on our website. We want to just make a few quick announcements. Again, thank you to Muckrack as our sponsor. We always appreciate the longtime support you've given to Sree's shows. The show is produced by Digimentors, the consulting firm that Sree had set up. And we want to let you know about this great book launch that's happening next Friday, Empowering Change, Asima's Journey of Transforming Lives. And I will put in a link to the show so you can set a reminder and watch that. Sree is going to be moderating 2 panels next week, talking about the work that Asima has done in India. And there you have a special message from Danny Boyle. The connection when they did Slumdog Millionaire, a number of the kids in the show were connected with Asima, and he's a big fan of the work they do. I also want to remind you of the show that I host on the second and third Thursdays of the month, Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. Last week's guest was Claire Philippek. She is a 31-year-old designer, online designer, but she has also been managing and at some point struggling with bipolar 1 disorder. And she shared her story on our show last week. So here is the link to Shining Light on Shadows. Certainly encourage you to watch the replay if you get a chance. If not, join us. Our next show will be October 17th. Not quite the second Thursday, but we'll share information about that as we go. And then before we turn back to Marcia, I'll just share a few quick comments that I'm seeing on Facebook. I know that Apollo is watching. It will watch the rerun. Thank you so much, Apollo. Lippy Roy offers greetings from Manhattan. And Patricia was saying that Riz was popularized in 2021 on social media. There is also Mary Curtis saying power just returned in Charlotte, North Carolina. And she wanted to say we'll watch enjoyed what she was able to catch, but we'll watch the repeat. Please send good thoughts to those affected by Helene. We absolutely will do that. Okay, with that, we're going to bring back Marcia for some final thoughts. Marcia, thank you again for joining us. Want to remind people about your Substack, New Rules, and let folks, if you can let folks know a little bit more about the work you do and your perspectives on things, that would be great.
Yes, we're looking into all sorts of things: technology, AI, the future of work. Some really interesting stories. Bradley just did a really terrific piece on a new way to work, the portfolio careers, maybe the future of work. I did a competitive piece that was about remote work and how that's fading. Labor Day has come and gone, of course, and more bosses now want you to back in the office, take it or leave it. It's people are thinking now that remote work, it won't disappear completely, but it's certainly not going to be what everybody thought. Just because we're digital, let's work remotely and we can save on real estate costs. It's not working out that easily, and it's really interesting. And one last thing I did want to mention too is we are looking into so many ways that who are we as Americans? As Heather Cox Richardson has talked with us, and we've met with her too on many occasions. We are going to be looking into, Bradley and I and New Rules and a team of folks, into how people are thinking before and after the election. Who are we? Certainly with an election and with our previous comments today, that if Trump wins, great. If he doesn't win, great. But new forms of politics are going to be with us for a while. And so it's really important to see, to kind of redefine who's an American, meaning not just who is a democracy, but how have we changed as a nation, and to really kind of tell the stories from the ground up, to really get out there and listen. So it's not just coastal elites telling the stories, but more really looking into the people who are united for their love of this country, but how they have very different opinions about how to go forward, and not just red state, blue state, but we're finding some very new perspectives that we think should be shared more widely. So please do read New Rules. We'd love to have you. If you sign up for a subscription, it's free for now. And we'd love to have you and hear your thoughts. It's a conversation. It's not just us pushing out things. It's pretty much a conversation with a really unique network that is growing fast. And we're very humbled and proud to be able to keep writing this and see its growth going forward. So thank you so much for having us. And it's been wonderful to meet many of you.
Thank you so much, Marcia. That was great. Again, as a reminder, you can find New Rules on Substack. The URL is newrulesmedia.substack.com, newrulesmedia.substack.com. What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Marcia. We covered so much ground. and we kicked off with talking about your work in Tokyo, of all things, which I wasn't expecting.
I wasn't either. Oh, you're really great.
That was
Yeah.
great. So appreciate you joining, you sharing, spending your Sunday morning with us. If you hadn't been on the show today, how would you have been spending your Sunday morning? Are you up early and out, or do you take it easy?
I would have been writing my Tuesday story for New Rules.
Well, hopefully you'll have enough time today to work on that later in the day.
I sure will.
Thank you, everyone. We hope you'll join us next week for another edition. Sree should be back in the big chair, and we will look forward to having you. Take care.
Thank you, Neil. And thank you, Sree, for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.